explode all over their faces harder than a Mia Khalifa video. Taken.
As of recording this video, I think I played about half of the prologue campaign for Warhammer 3, and I've gotta say this game is pretty awesome, and I've only scratched the surface. So hopefully now that I have a somewhat better understanding of the game, I'll be able to have a different perspective on some of these guides. Now for this particular legendary lord, I believe she's from Bretonnia. It's not really a faction that I'm particularly interested in playing, but you know, we'll see. They might have some cool mechanics going on that I don't know about.
Welcome to a noob's guide to Réponse de Lyonesse. This is not Réponse de
Lyonesse? Is that how you say that? I remember a comment stating that Cody's thing is mispronouncing words that aren't English, so I don't know about that one.
Lyonesse. It's Joan of Arc. While similar, there are critical differences. For starters, Joan of Arc is French, while Réponse de Lyonesse is Bretonnian, which I suppose is a suspiciously French version of England, so maybe that's not a good example. How about this one? While Joan of Arc is convicted of heresy and then burned alive at the stake, Réponse gets flaming attacks, because somebody at Games Workshop has a sense of humor darker than Wesley Snipes. Réponse de Lyonesse, the Demoiselle de Guerre, is a free Bretonnian lord for Total War Warhammer 2. She's a knight, she's a lady, she's a badass buzzsaw who burns through her enemies with the unbridled fury of a first-wave feminist who's been told to know her place and go fix a sandwich in the kitchen while the knights have man talk. And with Réponse at the head of your armies, she is poised to lead a horde of filthy peasants into the desert waste to drive back the undead menace with flesh, steel, and a stench that can only be described as a mixture of pig feces and unwashed orangutan.
Maybe it's not like a unit-specific thing, but she has like an ability that she can activate to give everybody flaming swords.
That eau de pesante. But before you hear about Réponse's awesome abilities, you really need to know her backstory to understand them. Réponse was just a peasant minding her own business, peasanting, and tending sheep until Bretonnia was overrun by a marauding horde of unwashed, uncultured hooligans from the north, which totally is not a parallel for the 100 Years' War. And Réponse was visited by a voice which told her to drive these cretins away as they were offensive to fashion and good taste, which also sounds suspiciously French now that I've said it aloud. But in Réponse's case, it was an Englishman, but chaos warriors who invaded to burn, pillage, and rhymes with grape their way across the continent, starting by killing the king of Bretonnia, Louis the Bold, and working their way down from there to Sir Robin the Not So Brave and the new underage prince and his army of mounted muttonheads. With the hordes of chaos now besieging the city of Couronne, the Lady of the Lake, the patron goddess of Bretonnia, decided it was time to send a woman to do a man's job. And I don't mean that in like a sexist way. Fighting was literally a man's job in Bretonnia. It's actually in their laws, with gender...
What, in their laws? Well, I guess it makes sense because it does seem to be more of like a very medieval kind of society.
And class roles strictly enforced through stern looks, regular beatings, social ostracization, and, you know, if all that fails, nooses, torches, and threats of chaos.
Yeah, I mean, Bretonnia doesn't seem like the best place to be, despite it looking very clean and shiny on the outside. But, you know, this is Warhammer. There can't be anything good without there having some sort of twist behind it.
For dinner. In the midst of these medieval social trappings, the 17-year-old Réponse was called upon to single-handedly take the women of Bretonnia from the kitchen to the battlefield. While grazing her herd of overly fuzzy goats near a burned-out village and totally not robbing the bodies of any fallen knights she came across, Réponse was visited in a blinding light by the spiritual embodiment of Bretonnia herself, the Lady of the Lake. This radiant vision of chivalric duty spake thusly in a pure golden voice.
Réponse, rid my land of these foul foes, for they do offend me with their presence.
To which the humble peasant Réponse, overwhelmed, replied, "Oi, you what, mate? You having a giggle? I'll bash your fucking head in, I swear on me mum." Which is exactly the kind of person the lady and Bretonnia needed at this moment. Someone who had spent their entire life tending sheep, because no other animal can inspire that level of frothing rage. Réponse then made ready for battle by stripping the armor off a dead knight, grabbing the reins of a terrified warhorse, and mounting it as only a virtuous peasant maiden could. Which is to...
I mean... I don't know how accurate this is, but I feel like Cody probably is the kind of guy to give you the most inaccurate way of telling accurate lore that you can't really refute. So I'll believe it.
To say that she told it in explicit detail how if it didn't take it down by at least 3 notches, she'd switch it from Destrier to Gelding. And don't think she was bluffing, because that knight she took the armor from was still breathing when she found him. But before she could go show what 17 years of shepherding can do to someone's sanity and fitness level, Repanse needed a weapon. So she galloped away in search of the nearest Grail chapel. These shrines are built on sites where the lady herself has appeared, and every Grail chapel is attended by a Grail knight, who guards it, maintains it, and exemplifies the values of the lady. Most Grail knights found these chapels on the sites where they themselves finally meet the lady and sup from her supersized Grail-flavored Slurpee. Drinking from this chalice of awesomeness makes the Grail Knights nearly immortal, but they will eventually start to age and die, and near the end of their vastly extended lifespans, they'll go live as Hermit Knights, guarding these Grail chapels with their very lives, as well as dispensing blessed weaponry and nuggets of wisdom for questing knights in their time of need. You know, like granddads everywhere do, because I can't be the only one who was given a pocket knife, a box of bullets, and a shotgun when I was 8. Bursting through the front doors of the chapel, Repanse would have stumbled into a scene straight out of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where the Hermit Knight would have stately risen from his chair and dusted the cobwebs from his shoulders, and gone into his usual spiel about choosing wisely from all the weapons arrayed behind him, only to sputter to a halt when he saw his guest was walking in with one less sword than he expected. But before the Hermit Knight could rev himself up about women desecrating his chapel of manliness, Repanse cut him off at the knees, because she was on a mission from God, and she wanted the biggest goddamn sword he had. Which, if I'm a 1,000-year-old knight who's been living alone for years, this would have caused all the blood to rush from my heart to places that hadn't stirred since the last ice age, and probably killed me on the spot. Stepping
Whoa there. I see. The lore.
over his undoubtedly smiling corpse, Repanse continued her rampant vandalism and rifled through the chapel until she found a reliquary with a sword inside. Then, true to form, she smashed it open rather than looking for a key, and then ripped a banner off the walls on her way out for good measure. Stepping out into the gloom of night, Repanse did an inventory. In her hand, the sword of Lyonesse, which hits like a truck, sucks the magic out of enemies, and makes them susceptible to your own. In her other hand, the fleur-de-lis banner, which, wait, where's the banner? CA seriously didn't include it? Oh, it's an in-game buff only. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, it's still lame, but I mean, if it bothers you as much as it does me, the guys over at SFO Grimhammer have a version you can download. I'll put it in the link below. Now fully kitted out, Repanse was ready to go.
Everything.
She was 106 miles from Couronne. She had a full tank of horse, half a pack of cigarettes, it was dark, and she was wearing sunglasses. Riding at breakneck speed, Repanse plowed through an entire army of retreating knights and didn't even break stride. Seeing this slip of a girl rush past them on her way to fight the Chaos Horde, the chivalric lords were overcome with the profound shame all men feel everywhere when their wife opens the pickle jar for them. And since only a woman...
Oh no. Look, man, it's okay. It's alright. Sometimes we all just need a little help.
And blessed by the lady herself would so brazenly ride about in men's clothing, the knights were honor-bound to follow her to glory, or, more likely certain death. Back at Couronne, the Chaos Hordes had finally given up on siege works or even basic carpentry, and instead decided to just use a giant log to batter down the gates, which with a resounding crash finally gave way, and the city of Couronne bent itself over to prepare for a proper sacking. And that's when the rumble of hooves reached the Chaos Lord's mutated ears. A great host of knights galloping towards them at full bore, trampling anyone in their path. At the head of this single giant lance formation was Repanse, with her fleur-de-lis banner flying. They cleaved their way through the chaos ranks and parted their army like a red sea of blood. And as the tip of the spear, Repanse found herself thrust into its very center, and now stood face to face with the monstrous Chaos General himself. The swarthy savage lifted a sword the size of a man to crush Repanse, but from beneath him, a light began to radiate. Bursting with the brilliance of 1,000 suns, Repanse shone with an aura of the lady. the Chaos Lord was agog at her majesty. And that's when Repanse kicked him in the knackers and then cut off his head. Because that.
Ah, yeah. Chaos or not chaos, that kind of attack is always super effective. I've also been wondering of how Cody gets these kind of shots, but I'm assuming it's because there's like some sort of, I guess, sandbox mode, where you can just deploy a bunch of armies depending on what you need, and then you can just have like a cinematic camera go through all of this to follow this kind of narrative that you've set up, which honestly is pretty cool, especially if like you want to have a supplemental battle, if you're like talking about Warhammer lore. Yeah, just a neat idea.
That's how peasants fight. Couronne was saved, the marauders were killed, and the young King Louis made Repanse a full knight and gave her the dukedom of Lyonesse. And all the peasants of the realm rejoiced. And that's where Repanse's story ends. But as the game Total War Warhammer takes place like 500 years after these events, we've got some serious blanks to fill in. I mean, to survive this long, Repanse would certainly have needed to waterfall from the Lady's Cup and become a full Grail Knight. And while women posing as knights were not allowed this honor because, you know, the obvious deception, the lady seems to have no qualms with openly female badasses because she actually did the same thing once before for Jean-Louis de Turenne, so suck on that, lore nerds. And Repanse must be all about keeping up the lady's vow or removing anything unsightly from the world as she starts the game in the deserts of Araby, leading the Chevaliers de Lyonesse. Not as the Duchess of Lyonesse, mind you, likely because taking that position would have also meant marrying her off to a Duke of Lyonesse, taking off her armor and learning the finer points of embroidery. And I honestly doubt the other nobility of Bretonnia would have been very impressed she was made a knight just because some watery tart threw a sword at her. So instead of a life of oppression,
I noticed that they're kind of charging in a particular triangular formation, which maybe that just happens naturally and that's how they form up, or is there like some sort of specific mechanic or button for that? Whether you would want them to charge in a line or in a triangle formation? Although I suppose a triangular formation would just be more effective at breaking through an enemy line. Rest in peace to the person leading the charge though.
Repanse chose to be the violence inherent in the system, and to continue sticking it to the patriarchy and breaking everything in sight. Because you can take the peasant out of the pasture, but the hatred for all life that comes with shepherding never really leaves you. In Repanse, the peasants of Bretonnia saw themselves, and flocked to her banner, because there's nothing a peasant loves more than a good ball-kicking joke, which makes Repanse the true champion of the people. And all peasants fighting under her have increased leadership and physical resistance in the game.
There it is.
And if that's still not enough for you, you can always stack 5th tier Bretonnian armories, which each add an additional 2 armor to every unit globally. Because at the end of the day, Repanse is all about putting that D in the P, taking these rock-hard men with long shafts and ordering them to probe and poke anything that breathes, and making exceptions even for that. So when they're not taking a pounding, the men under Repanse thrust harder, deeper, and come back ready for more even faster than other men.
I mean, we've seen this in other videos, but Cody's my kind of guy.
Because the lady has spoken, and what they can't poke, they burn. Because the only thing redneck peasants love more than a beer and a broad is a beer, a brat, and a bonfire. Combine this with a weirdly encyclopedic knowledge of The Walking Dead that most redneck peasants possess, and suddenly Repanse's men all have flaming attacks when fighting the undead, because they ain't scared of none of them zombies neither, and they'll knock them brains in faster than a scalded Hank, because any sensible peasant will tell you that once you put something in the ground, it ought to stay there. And once the fighting's done, Repanse asks these same men to beat their swords into plowshares, encouraging soldiers to put down roots and reclaim any conquered ruins. Which
I see. So yeah, she starts in the desert and probably has to fight a ton of the Tomb Kings, but she gets a buff where all the peasants get flaming swords, which is probably just more effective against undead. Since, I mean, it also stops regeneration, and I'm just gonna assume that they're weak to fire as well. It's an interesting mechanic, because, like, you'd be very good against any undead faction, but what about other factions? I guess you just play the game normally, and you just get a buff against the undead, then wouldn't undead lords gonna just hate you? But then again, it's mostly played in single player, so like, the AI probably can't utilize this very well. This is, of course, assuming that flaming weapons gives you that much of an advantage against the undead. Because for all I know, the values could be pretty negligible. And I mean, like, even with the buffs to the peasant units, I don't think the peasant units are what you would want to go for, like, the majority of the game.
Can be rebuilt in half the time at a quarter of the cost. The main problem you'll run into, though, is that these ruins are found in the middle of endless deserts, which means thirsty men and desert attrition claiming half of your army before you can reach a settlement. But REPANSE has the unique water supplies mechanic, which allows her to carry enough water into the waste to keep her and her army properly hydrated and peeing straw yellow for 5 turns. But even then, REPANSE is still a thirsty lady. Because unlike June Le Pacelle, the real name of Joan of Arc, REPANSE is no maiden. Instead, she's joined from the start of the game by her trusted second-in-command, Henri Le Massif, which roughly translates from French as Lexington Steel. Like anyone who's ever met him, REPANSE was left in awe at the size of this lad. In-game, this absolute unit counts as a large man even when he's on foot. And when REPANSE isn't using him as her personal mount, Henri can hop up on a hippogriff, the only paladin outside of Louis with enough stamina and strength to ride the beast, though to Henri they're a bit tame compared to the lady's chosen champion. In fact, with REPANSE and Henri, a Grail Relique, and a damsel with the lore of life, you can take on anything the map can throw at you. And in short order, the other errantry factions will be groveling at REPANSE's feet, begging to confederate into her army. But really, who needs these pompous gits? Because unlike every other Bretonnian lord, REPANSE gets no buffs to cavalry and nobility. She prefers her men dirty, illiterate, and with a life expectancy under 30 years.
Dang. I guess it is very fitting for her lore. But that's interesting. Learned something new. Apparently desert attrition is a thing. Because, like, in the battles, there doesn't seem to be any kind of, like, weather effects. But I suppose on the campaign map, there are effects that apply. Although, I'm assuming this is Warhammer 2. I don't know if this made it to Warhammer 3. Or maybe it's specifically, like, her campaign thing for Warhammer 2. And, like, if you're playing on Immortal Empires, the desert attrition isn't a thing. I would still assume, though, that it's just difficult for you to maybe occupy a city in an environment that your people aren't used to. Because, like, I can't really imagine a lizardman being like, oh, hell yeah, I'll go live in the desert. I don't think that's what they do. But that's also, yet again, probably just a faction-specific thing.
But even then, she does have a select following of knights, the Defenders of the Fleur de Lis, a unique knights-errant regiment of renown, sworn to protect REPANSE and her banner. And
I think a regiment of renown is like just a special unit that you can get based on unlocking certain missions and stuff like that. Because, like, even in the prologue that I played, we did get one special unit depending on the type of mission that we beat, and we could only recruit one of those units. So I'm assuming it's a mechanic similar to that.
In my personal headcanon, an entirely female cavalry troop. Because keep in mind, some Bretonnian women have been known to break free of societal constraints by disguising themselves as men, and every year, at least one dead knight is discovered to have been a woman all along. And if there's one thing we know the Brits love, it's their lady warriors. And if
I mean, we could always just mod the game, right? I'm sure there are plenty of mods that kind of change the character models. And given how popular Warhammer 3 is, yeah, there probably is one out there.
All that isn't enough to convince you that the Defenders of the Fleur de Lis are women in disguise. Just look at REPANSE's advisor. If that man doesn't stuff his pants with a cucumber and 2 walnuts every morning, I'll eat my hat. So burn your bras, harness your inner Xena, and give yourself an ill-advised page boy haircut. REPANSE de Lyonesse is here to lead a crusade against the undead and reclaim their lands in the name of the living and the lady. Because this has been a Noob's Guide to REPANSE de Lyonesse. Thanks for watching. The visuals for today's episode were provided by House Adanion. House Adanion is also Australian and has an uncle in one of New South Wales' firefighting brigades. And if you're not aware, his home province of New South Wales has been heavily hit by forest fires in the recent weeks. So pinned at the top of the comments below, where you can find a direct link to the New South Wales Firefighting Brigade, and every little penny you could donate would help. Or you can instead purchase their sexy fireman calendar, because nothing says fire down under like a bunch of smoking hot Australians. Weebs. All proceeds from the calendars go to support a local children's hospital which specializes in burn victims. And though this may not be a fun, lighthearted ending, I do personally recommend the month of June in the calendar. You can kind of see his shrimp laid out on the Barbie, if you know what I mean.
Interesting leader, but not really my kind of thing. For those of you guys who have played her campaign, how do you feel about her? Let me know. But now for the Lizardman leader who has a pretty funny name, TIKTAQ'TO. I would assume he gives buffs to like aerial units and is more of a scouting kind of leader, but we'll see.
Welcome to a noob's guide to TIKTAQ'TO. This is TIKTAQ'TO, which is how you would pronounce his name if it was actually Aztec. Not Gorok, Oxyotl, the Kai, Teto, Chacox, or any other footnote character the internet wanked itself into a frenzy over, speculating as the free lord for Total War Warhammer 2. TIKTAQ'TO is the one Games Workshop created after they watched Dinotopia and thought, we should steal that, but then make it weird. He's a hotshot fighter pilot with a cocky attitude and a reckless demeanor that constantly puts him in the danger zone. TIKTAQ'TO is just Tom Cruise, but taller and less slimy. He even comes with his own Iceman to mount. His Pterodon life partner and starting companion, Swoop. The eye in the heavens, the master.
All these names are just so good, man. And I mean, like, I'm not even mad. Like, Lord Croak being the sland mage that actually croaked. Swoop being the name of a pterodactyl that swoops down to attack its enemies. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of characters, and I mean, there are some, like, creatively named ones, but the other ones that are just, you know, fun. I can appreciate.
Of the skies of Hexoatil, TIKTAQ'TO starts his campaign on a completely different continent than the city of Hexoatil because game reasons. TIKTAQ'TO, in fact, gets his own fresh new zone carved into the Mortal Empires map to start in, called the Southern Desert of Araby, which allows him to take a giant guano all over the Southlands and any hopes of ever seeing an.
I like how I mentioned earlier in the video that lizardmen probably wouldn't do very well in the desert because that's not their kind of environment, and now we're here. What a coincidence.
Araby DLC at the same time. Stuck at the bottom of this continent, he has the imperial colony of Sudenburg to the east, the Tomb Kings just above them, and then, if you don't die in the deserts, the undead Strigos Empire to deal with. And in case you thought you could go west, nope, dwarves. Because in Warhammer, you can't throw a rock at a mountain without hitting a dwarf crapping in a cave somewhere. The one saving grace of his starting position is the ruined city of El Kalabad to your north. But don't get too excited, because there's a Skaven enclave of Clan Eshin waiting to take that before you even get there. Because screw you and your very hard starting position difficulty, that's why.
Dang, dude. Very hard starting position. I haven't really taken a good look at the campaign starting screen, but I do know that in the starting screen for Warhammer 2, there is like a difficulty where it tells you, oh, starting position difficult or easy or whatnot. That's a little unfair. I wonder how you would manage this if you have so many factions that could potentially just come and attack you at the very start of the game. Plus, you're also not like in an environment that you would want to ideally be in as a lizardman. But hey, maybe the more experienced players can deal with it pretty easily.
Vortex campaign is mercifully a bit easier. Sudenburg still takes up everything to the north, and the Leaf Cutters hold the east. Though you start surrounded by enemies, he gets a free city to your bottom left, so that's key. And as the Dune Kingdoms to the northwest begin as the literal weakest enemy on the continent, it's a hop, skip, and a jump attack at them for an easy fur resource. And if you don't see where I was going with this joke, you should probably start this video over, because I couldn't go this whole time without making at least one TIKTAQ'TO joke. Just like Games Workshop couldn't stop their flawless run of naming nonsense. Together, TIKTAQ'TO, Swoop, and his flying circus throw convention to the winds and fly higher, harder, faster, stronger, so you'll be able to see 25% further on the campaign map from up there. And they do it to the Daft Punk version, not the lame Yeezy remix. And if you perform his unique Rite of Sumki, I'm sorry, wait, hold on, Sunki? He's the Lizardmen's Old One's god of water, and I actually think Creative Assembly meant to put Tepik, the Old One's god of air here, and it's just a small typo, because, you know, thematically. So make sure to post this on the official Total War forums and Reddit about how CA is purposefully screwing over the Lizardmen and destroying the franchise. I'm sure that'll get that fixed lickety-split. The right of...
Bruh. I wonder if this has changed, because, yeah, maybe wrong god.
Sunki here allows you to reset your campaign movement in the middle of a turn, allowing you to use Forced March twice in a single turn, giving you unparalleled distance covering abilities, so you can even outrun Kenyans. Okay, maybe not Kenyans. That would be too OP. But with this character, Creative Assembly is pushing boundaries, exploring depths only previously plumbed by the movie Shrek, and featuring its first ever interspecies relationship. And before you say that's illegal, I'd remind you that you can't have a skink without some kink.
You're not wrong. Oh damn, I never noticed that. I learn more and more about the Lizardmen every day. Man, they're such a great faction.
TIKTAQ'TO has a true bond with Swoop. You start mounted on him, and he refuses to ever get down from the guy, even when bigger, burlier Saurian mounts are available to him, because that's what love is. But the real question here is, does this illicit romance pass the Captain Jack Harkness test for exploring new romantic frontiers and deciding whether or not you can bang a foreign life form? The tenets of which are fairly straightforward. Does Swoop have human-level intelligence or greater? Well, that's a negative, Ghost Rider.
No,
TIKTAQ'TO is clearly the brains of this operation, with his Saurian spouse just following orders as a beast of burden. And I'm not even sure if skinks have human-level intelligence, so this is a bar low enough that you'd have to limbo under it. Can Swoop talk or otherwise communicate with language?
I don't
let's
think
check.
So.
I don't speak Pteranodon, but that sounds like a no. And the biggie, is Swoop of full maturity for his species? Well, according to lore, Swoop is the largest pterodon in the Warhammer world, but that could just be glandular. And even though up until now I've been assuming his gender and saying he, Swoop doesn't seem to lay eggs, so that's no help either. But as any good paleontologist will tell you, male pteranodons were actually larger than females, and the long crest that we see here on Swoop only developed in males, as a surefire sign of visible sexual maturity. So we can confirm that Swoop is indeed an adult male pterodon, and that TIKTAQ'TO is a true stick jockey. And before anyone tries to correct me, there is no such thing as a pterodactyl. Pterodactylus antiquus and the pteranodon belong to the pterodon family, which is why TIKTAQ'TO is a pterodon rider. So don't test me on this. I've got a 3-year-old.
What kind of research are we doing for these videos? This wouldn't even be something that I would think of if I ever played TIKTAQ'TO or like thought of doing a video for TIKTAQ'TO. God damn, Cody's really creative with these.
But with a bangability score of only 1 out of 3, this relationship is only legal in Alabama and certain parts of northern Wales. And TIKTAQ'TO is not alone here. Unwilling to be kink-shamed into hiding this non-conventional lifestyle, any skink lord recruited by TIKTAQ'TO is given their own pterodon to mount at level 1, so they too can take to the skies and experience the sweet kiss of the wind on their scales. While TIKTAQ'TO is technically a free DLC lord for Warhammer 2, he really requires the units that come with the Prophet and the Warlock DLC to be effective. So, like any good...
You know, that's actually not a problem. Massive shout out to the patron who gifted me this particular DLC. At some point down the line, yes, we will be playing Ichid Claw, but I'm just really glad to have the Lizardman units from that DLC.
Dealer, Creative Assembly gives us the first taste for free, and includes one in his starting army. Pterodons with firebolas do everything the normal ones do, except better. Because there's never a downside to burning balls of blazing fury. And Ripperdactyls are a new flying anti-infantry unit that eat a backline of archers fast.
Oh my god! Whoa! Dude, that is flying death right there. It reminds me of like the flying units for the vampires, just swooping down on top of the walls and just eating everybody. I guess this is the Lizardman version of that. Anti-infantry flying units. Is it possible to maybe make just your entire army just full of flying units? I don't know if that would be a good idea, because I'd imagine they're probably more fragile than your normal ground units. so they would be easily shot down. Because if they're not, then I wouldn't see a downside to them. Like, the enemy cavalry wouldn't even be able to charge you, and you can just rain hell upon them with your fire bolas, I think is what Cody said earlier. Which I'm assuming is like just a flaming rock, or maybe just like an explosive that you drop down on a bunch of infantry units. But like, what if you had a bunch of flying units and you went up against an army that doesn't have any ranged units? Like some of the vampire ones, I think, don't have ranged units. If we're not talking about Vampire Coast, then wouldn't you just, I don't know, wreck face? I mean, I guess they have flying units, so they can at least combat it, but it also depends on the army makeup. I don't know. A lot to think about. I haven't played around with any flying units yet in the prologue, because I don't think Kislev has any, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Or, of course, you guys could also let me know.
Than Baptist to the stake line of Golden Corral, and with Ripperdactyls, you can even throw a bloat toad at your enemies to drive them into a frenzy of attack, so extra points to CA for true Warhammer lore. And if you're unclear on how this mechanic actually works, just go to a parade and watch when politicians throw candy at children. They'll tear each other apart over a Tootsie Roll, and then they'll throw that abomination back in the gutter where it belongs, because even children have some self-respect. The Ripperdactyl Regiment of Renown version, the Colossedon Hunters, have the anti-large trait, making them useful to tie down scout cavalry, but too weak to actually kill them outright, all the while sitting there as easy targets to be riddled full of arrows. And
okay, I guess there's that downside. Their attack power just isn't very high, so like filling your entire army with them probably isn't the greatest idea ever. Unless if TikTaq'TO makes that possible by buffing them.
That's actually the problem with an all-aerial army in this game. They're weak against massed range. On the tabletop, the Lizardmen could counter this with their dragon-like Kotal unit, named after the mythological Quetzalcoatl, flying around as a giant siege engine and then lobbing insults from range, like pigeons. But without him, TikTaq'TO will never field a fully aerial force, and still requires boots on the ground to be effective. But that doesn't mean he's a pushover. He fields all flying units at half their upkeep cost, so you can recruit tons of them. And when you're in foreign territory, they'll even get a +10 bonus to melee attack, allowing you to be more birds than, well, birdemic. And
oh my god, that movie. Who made that? Who thought that was a good idea? Oh, Jesus. I don't know why. When did I first see that movie? It was probably some sort of meme or somebody mentioned it. But yeah, I saw some clips from it and it was something. Regardless, I'm kind of a little bummed out that like you can't field a full aerial army. Because I feel like TikTaq'TO would just be, you know, that guy to do it. I don't know if in Warhammer 3 they've changed the values and whatnot so that it's now viable. Or maybe they've added a particular unit that will make it viable. Or in a different case, maybe they don't want that kind of gameplay to be, you know, optimal. Since everything would be otherwise balanced around ground units, like having a bunch of lines and like doing their usual thing. But yeah, I don't know. I just have the fantasy of like an entire fleet of flying units just raining down terror upon enemies. And then you'd play TikTaq'TO to achieve that, but you know, maybe not.
While all Pterodon riders have the special ability to bombard the enemy by dropping rocks from the sky, when they have TikTaq'TO as their leader, they lash on a second salvo, so they can swoop onto the battlefield with both balls blazing, ready to dip their sacks and bring more teabags than a 12-year-old at a Call of Duty tournament. And TikTaq'TO gets an even more devastating version, called the innuendo-laden Spheres of Sotek, giant orbs carved in mystical runes that dangle beneath Swoop as he flies, ready to rain ruin and Arabian goggle unsuspecting foes as you plop them down for sweaty splash damage. You can even improve the ability so they'll explode all over their faces harder than a Mia Khalifa video.
I see you too are a man of culture, Mr. Cody. Also, by the way, I totally don't know that name. I don't know it. I heard it from a friend.
Together, you can easily make half your army flyers, and then paint the field faster than a flock of pigeons who just ate Taco Bell, wiping out—
Okay, half the army, yeah, sure, it's fine. You can have, like, them go in for, like, a bombing run to soften up the enemy, and then you'd have your ground units charge in afterwards. Could be a good tactic, and probably the intended way to play. I wonder if TikTaq'TO gives any particular buffs to a certain type of ground unit, or can like have an upgrade for them. Because like I'm just trying to figure out an optimal way to play this guy. At some point, I'm pretty sure I'll pick him up since, I don't know, Lizardmen, you know? I just gotta play them Lizardmen.
Out most of the enemy army in a bombing run in the battle's first seconds. It turns the opening moment of every engagement into your own personal apocalypse now.
Oh boy. Montage. Here we are. This is great. Oh my god. This is amazing. I love the camera shots. Masterclass in cinematography right here. Oh well, goodbye, Skaven. Beautiful. Beautiful carnage. Look at this. Raining fire down from the skies. You couldn't possibly beat this. Unless, of course, if you know, had a bunch of ranged weapons that did a ton of damage, then, yeah, you probably very easily beat this army.
That? I love the smell of guano in the morning. Thanks for watching,
Same.
and if the jokes in this video made you want to subscribe to my channel, then I hope you know where the incognito button is. And if you have an opinion on what lord should be next for this series, leave it below. I'll probably ignore it, but it'll give you the illusion of participation. So have a great day out there.
Incredible video. I love this one. But yeah, if you guys haven't already, go check out Cody's channel, link at the top of the description. Go and give him a like and a sub. And if you'd like to check out more of my reactions to Cody's videos, check out the playlist that has magically appeared on your screen. We'll definitely be checking out more. I think I'll do an entire series on each of his Noob's guides.